Hello everyone and welcome to my first review as Honor Marked. Today we are going to be looking at a game called Republic Commando. This is a really old school game that I played a ton when I was a kid, and I am eager to be taking a look at it in a more adult light, as weird as that sounds. So let's go ahead and get started with what Republic Commando actually is. Republic Commando is a classic first-person shooter made with the Unreal Engine set in the Star Wars universe that came out in the year 2005 or so. Today I wanted to sit back and take a look at this ancient shooter and evaluate its merit and pitfalls, so come with me while we take a trip down memory lane. So, what exactly is Republic Commando? Let's see if we can answer that in a satisfying way. Republic Commando is a first-person shooter in the same vein as the original Halo or Half-Life games, but with the added charm of being in the Star Wars universe. Similarly to the previously stated games, Republic Commando has a pretty serious focus on the story elements of the game, being placed directly in the middle of the Clone Wars and before Order 66, but we'll get into that topic a little bit later. I have a fairly long and extensive history with this game. It is one of my favorite games from my childhood, just due to how unusual the game is in relation to the rest of the games in the Star Wars lineup. It touches on a great many topics that otherwise go unexplored in the Star Wars universe. Being able to see the Clone Wars from the point of view of a clone is fairly new as a concept, and at the time of this coming out for sure. Coupled with the fact that I actually played this game before I ever played Halo or Half-Life, it's easy to see how this game became my hook into the FPS genre as a whole. So, I did mention that this game explores concepts that went completely unexplored prior to this game coming out. This includes gore, death, war glorification, the whole 9 yards, and the story of a character in the Star Wars universe who is neither a Jedi nor a Force sensitive, which is incredibly wild for a Star Wars game. In this game, you are just a clone commando of course, but just a clone, no different from the rest of your pod brothers. Enemies you fight will often explode in a shower of gore when you kill them, or will splatter in your visor with their blood when you hit them with a melee attack, which is incredibly unusual for a Star Wars game. Especially considering that they're owned by Disney now. Disney, I don't think, would ever allow something like that to happen in this day and age. The game itself goes really far to glorify the idea of eliminating your foes with extreme prejudice, and your squad mates often calling out to you, cheering you on when you do a killing blow to an enemy. It's a nice touch that goes a long way towards helping the player feel immersed in this war zone going on around you. You'll often see enemies flying overhead, shooting at each other or shooting down at you that are just sort of like set dressing for the rest of the game. Similarly, when you or your squad mates go down, the rest of your squad makes a very serious effort to make you aware of how bad things are getting. They struggle with each other and want to work with you to overcome a problem. Secondly, I want to point out again that this game does not let you play as a Jedi or Force sensitive or anything of the sort. It's completely different in that regard. In this game, you are not a Jedi. You don't have a lightsaber or the Force or anything similar. You rely on your squad, your blaster, and your wit to defeat enemies. Making sure you place your team in a good spot goes a long way towards ensuring you can progress through levels, and neglecting this fact or placing them poorly can leave you vulnerable in a situation where recovering your squad or you getting recovered is impossible without some very serious casualties. I believe this game is the only modern first-person shooter in the Star Wars franchise to date. I consider Battlefront series to be a third-person shooter truly. This actually causes the game to have a few issues that I find incredibly annoying though. The controls, for example, on PC are pretty terrible. In most FPS games on PC, you'll be pressing down the right mouse button to aim down sights, but in Republic Commando, you'll be holding down that tiny middle mouse button. It's very uncomfortable. In fact, the controls are so bad that on my first playthrough, I wasn't even aware you could aim down sight, leading me to hip fire uncontrollably at every enemy in the game. Of course, I'm sure these discrepancies are remedied through actually reading the help tips available when you play through the game, but honestly, who reads those anyway? Come on. Going into this game years later for recording purposes, I expected the characters to be mostly irrelevant and flat due to the fact that this happens between 2 canon episodes of the prequel movies. I expected the writers to have just given the players a few throwaway characters to mess around with before killing them off unceremoniously. I was wrong though. Each of the characters have their own personality and characteristics that makes you actually get attached to them well after completing the game and moving on to newer, better games. This is because Republic Commando incorporates a squad system that, as I mentioned prior, is integral to playing the game well. Being able to send a squad mate to flank at a specific area or pick up another squad mate is intrinsically tied to the gameplay loop of the game in such a way that not having your squad alongside you physically makes certain parts of the game impossible to complete. Simply put, the squad characters in this game are exactly what squad mates in Halo Reach should have been, and frankly, they're what squad mates should be in every game going forward. Unfortunately for us, being from the future, we know that is not the case. So, after playing this game as an adult, how does the game hold up? Well, graphically the game is not amazing. I remember it looking much better, but that was probably due to the lower resolution, smaller size of the TV I initially played the game on. Many of the polygons on character designs stick out, but overall the game is not exactly ugly either. The graphics are only slightly worse than Halo 2, which isn't to say they're bad, just a little dated. A mod to upscale the textures would go a long way towards making the game look brand new again, as animation still looks smooth and good. I'd rate them maybe a solid 6 or 7 out of 10. The gameplay and controls are what you might expect from an older FPS game that came from before Halo 2. There are a few clunky mechanics because the Xbox 360 controller hadn't come out and revolutionized the way we handle FPS layouts. Some of the buttons don't really make sense where they are, especially on the keyboard and mouse setup, where I can't even remember off the top of my head what button actually causes my character to melee, or which buttons let me swap grenades. It's a big mess. I actually went through 80% of the game without knowing I could switch grenades, which is actually insane. However, I do want to give credit where it is due. The way the squad mechanics are integrated into the control scheme and the game is incredibly smooth. Asking a squad mate to cancel an order or set up a specific position is as easy as pointing and pressing a button. So in this department, I'll give the game an 8 out of 10. The good vastly outweighs the bad in this particular scenario. And now we arrive at the story of the game. This topic is a bit tougher to approach because whether or not the story is good depends entirely upon your taste. As a kid, I truly enjoyed the story and grew incredibly attached to all of the squad mates. Secondarily, without the internet, it was impossible to get spoiled on the ending of the game, so I trudged merrily along towards the end of the game without knowing what would happen to Delta 07. I still remember being actually upset for days after this happened and being pumped, waiting for Republic Commando 2 to finally come out. I really wanted it to wrap up the story. This actually, in my opinion, does the story more harm than good. The game was clearly designed to have a secondary part which would give the closure about the missing squad mate. Because that never happened, we're left with an unfinished story which, while enjoyable up until the end, does leave a sour taste in your mouth if you hate cliffhangers. I don't really want to give it a rating, but if I had to assign a number, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10. It leaves a little bit to be desired, but if they were able to finish it, I'm sure it would have been fantastic. So, 6 out of 10. So, with all these things in mind, what do I truly think about the game in hindsight? Republic Commando is a childhood favorite game of mine. It's not perfect, it's not terrible, but it's worth a good playthrough if you can grab it cheap on Steam or other similar storefronts. It's a nice game to have in your library, and it will give you a good 10 hours of gameplay at the very least. Even more if you decide to play it on a harder difficulty, but that's up to you and your tastes. It is one of the first FPS games I was ever able to experience, and I cherish it as one of my all-time favorite games at the time of it coming out. I see it as a weird piece of Star Wars history that everyone should have the opportunity to experience. So, if you've never played it, you have a great game to add to your wish list or your to-do list when you've got free time. Or hey, maybe if you're interested in watching the game get played poorly, check out my playthrough on this channel and subscribe while you're at it. So, that concludes my little trip down memory lane. If you enjoy this type of content and are interested in checking out my playthrough of this series, I'll have a playlist on screen towards the end of the video. Make sure you do me a solid and hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment with how you feel about the game, etc. It helps my channel grow. and get more viewers, and it shows me I actually have an audience out there. So, with that out of the way, I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.